Hey there! Welcome to Color and Craft Haven, a little corner of calm where we can slow down, breathe, and add a little color to the day. Today, we're venturing into the wonderfully squishy world of clay, specifically the eternal creative question of air-dry clay versus polymer clay. At first glance, these two materials seem remarkably similar. They are soft, moldable, available in craft stores, and perfectly capable of convincing you that you absolutely need 17 tiny sculpting tools, despite previously having none. But air-dry clay and polymer clay behave very differently, and choosing the wrong one can turn a relaxing afternoon into an unexpected scientific investigation titled, "Why is my mushroom cracked in half?" So today, we're going to compare what these clays actually are, how they behave, and what they're good at, and which one might suit your particular brand of creative chaos. Let's begin with air-dry clay, which has perhaps the most refreshingly honest name in the entire craft store. It is clay. You leave it in the air. It dries. Marketing departments occasionally achieve perfection. Most craft air-dry clays are water-based materials containing some combination of natural clay, cellulose fibers, binders, fillers, or similar ingredients, depending on the particular product. You sculpt your creation while the material is soft, then leave it exposed to air so that moisture gradually evaporates. No oven is required, which immediately makes air-dry clay appealing to beginners and anyone who doesn't particularly want to explain why there are miniature mushrooms occupying the kitchen appliances. Drying can take roughly a day or several days depending on the brand, thickness, humidity, and size of the project. Unfortunately, staring at it impatiently does not accelerate the process. Extensive testing conducted by crafters everywhere has confirmed this. Don't poke at it, let it dry. Polymer clay, despite having clay in its name, is a very different material. It is essentially a synthetic modeling compound based primarily on PVC particles combined with plasticizers, pigments, and other ingredients that give it its distinctive workable texture. Instead of drying through exposure to air, polymer clay stays workable until heat cures it. That means you can leave a polymer clay project sitting on your workspace while you reconsider every decision you have ever made since choosing that particular shade of green, then return later and continue working. Once you're satisfied, you cure it according to the manufacturer's temperature and timing settings. That is important. Air-dry clay hardens because moisture leaves it. Polymer clay hardens because controlled heat causes physical and chemical changes within the material itself. One is basically saying, please leave me alone for 2 to 5 days. The other is saying, I shall remain squishy until somebody produces an oven. That difference dramatically changes the working experience. Air-dry clay gradually begins losing moisture while you're sculpting, so there's a natural clock ticking in the background. You usually have plenty of working time, but eventually the surface starts becoming firmer and less cooperative. Water can often help smooth the surface and keep the clay workable, although adding too much can create its own problems. This is clay, not soup. Polymer clay does not have that same drying clock, making it wonderful for projects that require slow, detailed work. You can spend ages sculpting one tiny eyebrow, deciding that eyebrow has developed an unacceptable attitude, remove it, replace it, reconsider your entire artistic direction, make tea, come back, and continue. However, polymer clay can become softer from the warmth of your hands. While some brands or older clay may initially feel quite firm and require conditioning before they become comfortably workable, you have to check the packaging. Conditioning is one of polymer clay's peculiar little rituals. Before sculpting, the clay generally needs to be kneaded, rolled, folded, or otherwise worked until it becomes flexible, smooth, and evenly conditioned. This distributes the plasticizers throughout the material and makes the clay easier to shape without crumbling or cracking. Fresh, soft clay might condition quite quickly, while firmer clay can make you wonder whether you accidentally purchased a decorative brick. Air-dry clay usually requires much less preparation. You open the package, take what you need, and begin shaping it, although kneading it briefly can help create a consistent texture. The important part is immediately resealing whatever air-dry clay you're not using. Leaving the entire package sitting open while you work is pretty much inviting the clay to begin its retirement early. Polymer clay is considerably less concerned about exposure to air, although keeping it clean and properly stored is still important. Now we need to discuss shrinkage and cracking, because this is where air-dry clay occasionally decides that our peaceful creative afternoon has lacked sufficient adversity. Since water evaporates from air-dry clay as it cures, the pieces generally shrink somewhat. Uneven drying, very thick sections, overly wet clay, poorly joined pieces, or rapid moisture loss can contribute to cracking. That doesn't mean that air-dry clay inevitably cracks. Good construction technique, appropriate thickness, careful joining, and slower, even drying can greatly reduce the risk. Polymer clay does not shrink through water loss because there isn't water evaporating the same way, so dimensional changes are generally minimal when cured correctly. Cracking can still happen, particularly if the clay is improperly conditioned, the structure is poorly supported, or the piece is undercured. Apparently, no material is willing to provide us with absolute immunity from tiny sculptural betrayal, so follow the manufacturer's directions. Durability is another important difference, although neither material can simply be declared universally stronger without considering what you're making. Finished air-dry clay is typically somewhat porous and can be vulnerable to moisture unless it's appropriately sealed. Thin or delicate projects may also be fragile, especially with lighter weight air-dry formulas. Polymer clay, when properly cured, can be remarkably durable and slightly flexible, depending on the brand and the thickness. That flexibility can make it particularly suitable for smaller pieces and detailed creations that might snap more easily if they were made from a brittle material. However, polymer clay is not indestructible. A paper-thin fairy wing still has limits, and those limits may become painfully apparent approximately 4 seconds after you confidently announce, "Look how delicate this is." For sturdy decorative pieces, both materials can work beautifully. For extremely fine detail or small objects that will be handled regularly, polymer clay often has the advantage. The scale of your project also matters. Air-dry clay can be excellent for larger decorative pieces, dishes intended for decorative use, ornaments, sculptures, textured wall art, figurines, little tiny houses, fantasy mushrooms, and approximately 14,000 other objects the internet will eventually persuade you to make. Larger solid pieces can become heavy and may dry unevenly though, so armatures, lightweight cores, or hollow construction techniques can be useful depending on the project. Polymer clay is particularly popular for smaller sculptures, miniatures, jewelry components, charms, figurines, decorative objects, and really detailed fantasy creations. Making very large, solid sculptures entirely from polymer clay would be possible in some circumstances, but it can become expensive and unnecessarily heavy. At some point, artistic freedom meets the price tag, and the price tag gently suggests that perhaps your enormous dragon could use an internal armature. Surface detail is another fascinating comparison. Air-dry clay can accept textures beautifully, especially when it is fresh and soft. Stamps, texture plates, natural objects, sculpting tools, and even ordinary household items can create really interesting impressions. Once dry, many air-dry clays can be sanded, carved, painted, or otherwise refined. Polymer clay is particularly good at holding very fine sculptural details, which is one of the reasons miniature artists really love it. Tiny scales, facial features, fur textures, leaves, food miniatures, and other details can be remarkably crisp. Polymer clay also comes in an absurdly delightful range of colors, including translucent, metallic, glittery, stone-like, pearlescent, and other specialty effects. You can blend colors before curing and create patterns directly within the clay itself. Air-dry clay is often treated more like a sculptural surface that will be primed and painted afterward. Polymer clay sometimes arrives already dressed for the party. Painting and finishing deserve their own discussion because this is where air-dry clay becomes particularly satisfying for people who enjoy transforming a plain surface. Once the piece is dried completely, acrylic paint is commonly used to add color, shading, patterns, and details. Depending on the clay and desired finish, you might also sand or prime the surface beforehand. A compatible sealant can then help protect the finished piece from ordinary handling and incidental moisture, although sealing does not magically transform air-dry clay into a waterproof ceramic. Please don't make an air-dry cereal bowl and then blame breakfast when events become structurally complicated. Polymer clay can also be painted, but it doesn't necessarily need to be because the color can be built directly into the material. When using paints, glazes, varnishes, adhesives, or sealers with polymer clay, compatibility matters because some products can remain sticky or react poorly with the cured clay. Check the packaging. We should also address the oven situation because polymer clay occasionally makes beginners really nervous. Polymer clay can be cured at relatively low temperatures according to the specific manufacturer's directions, often using a conventional household oven. Temperature accuracy matters tremendously. Too little heat or insufficient curing time can leave the finished piece weak, while excessive heat can discolor, scorch, or damage the clay, and potentially produce unpleasant fumes. An oven thermometer, therefore, can be extremely useful because household ovens sometimes interpret temperature settings more as philosophical suggestions than precise measurements. Always follow the instructions for the exact clay you're using. Ensure proper ventilation, and avoid assuming every polymer clay brand has identical requirements. Air-dry clay avoids this entire conversation. It sits on a shelf and quietly handles matters itself, although it demands payment in the form of patience. Cost is interesting because air-dry clay often appears cheaper when you compare larger quantities, especially for bigger projects. A substantial package can provide plenty of material for decorative sculptures and experiments without making you feel as though every slightly oversized mushroom is threatening your financial future. Polymer clay is commonly sold in relatively small blocks, and purchasing many colors can add up quickly. The advantage is that you can mix colors, you can buy larger blocks of frequently used shades, and you can use surprisingly small amounts for miniature work. There's also much less urgency about using opened polymer clay immediately because it does not air dry. With air-dry clay, good storage matters because once that moisture disappears from unused clay, convincing it to return to its former glory can be somewhere between difficult and a minor act of necromancy. For beginners, I actually think both materials are approachable, but they really reward different personalities. Air-dry clay is wonderful if you want straightforward sculpting without purchasing special curing equipment. It can also be forgiving when you enjoy painting because the sculpting stage does not have to carry all the visual interest. Make the shape, let it dry, then bring out the paint and convince everyone that that slightly crooked cottage was deliberately designed by whimsical forest architects. Polymer clay is excellent for patient detail work. It's good for miniatures and color mixing and projects you want to revisit before committing to the final form. If you're someone who changes your mind 17 times while creating, polymer clay will patiently wait through all 17 identities. Air-dry clay, meanwhile, has somewhere to be. Neither personality is wrong. One simply operates with deadlines, while the other apparently has tenure. There are also practical questions about what happens after your project is finished. Neither material should automatically be treated as food safe simply because it is hardened, and decorative dishes are not necessarily functional dinnerware. Air-dry clay is particularly unsuitable for prolonged water exposure unless a specific product is designed and finished for that purpose, and even sealers have limitations. Polymer clay is water resistant once properly cured. That does not mean every polymer clay project is automatically appropriate for food contact or high heat or outdoor exposure or any other demanding application. Always check the manufacturer's guidance when your project needs to perform a specific function. Craft materials are very good at being craft materials. Trouble begins when we suddenly assign them careers they never applied for. Your tiny polymer dragon can guard your desk magnificently. It does not need to become cookware. So which clay should you choose? If you want larger decorative projects and a paintable surface and a simple setup, and absolutely no heat curing, air-dry clay is probably the easiest place to begin. If you want miniatures, intricate detail, extensive color options, long working time, or greater durability for small-handled pieces, polymer clay might suit you better. But this doesn't have to become an exclusive relationship. Plenty of artists use both materials depending on the project. Choosing between them is less like selecting the objectively superior clay and more like deciding whether today's creative problem requires a spoon or a screwdriver. Both are excellent tools. You simply don't want to discover halfway through the project that you've enthusiastically committed to the wrong one and are now trying to tighten a screw with cutlery. The best way to learn either material is ultimately to make something small and deliberately uncomplicated. Give yourself permission to create a slightly questionable mushroom, an uneven trinket dish, a tiny ghost with suspicious proportions, or a miniature fantasy creature that technically has 4 legs but appears to have negotiated them individually. Pay attention to how the clay responds to pressure, moisture, warmth, tools, joining, smoothing, drying, or curing. These observations will teach you far more than expecting your first project to emerge looking professionally manufactured. Clay is wonderfully tactile precisely because you learn through your hands. Mistakes can often be repaired, disguised, painted over, repurposed, or declared an artistic choice with sufficient confidence. Creativity becomes considerably more relaxing when perfection is removed from the guest list. Ultimately, air-dry clay and polymer clay are not really competitors. There are two different routes to the same wonderfully tactile kind of creativity. Air-dry clay gives you an accessible sculpting material that hardens naturally and offers a fantastic blank surface for painting and decorating. Polymer clay gives you extended working time, brilliant color possibilities, excellent detail, and durable results when properly conditioned and cured. Understanding those differences lets you choose based on the project, rather than whichever package happens to look prettiest in the store. Although I fully acknowledge that attractive packaging has defeated stronger people than me. That's it for today's colorful time. Let me know in the comments whether you prefer air-dry clay, polymer clay, or whether you're currently surrounded by both and refusing to choose sides. Take care, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next one.